Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, hello everyone. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler here. Pleasure to be on with you today. Looking forward to jumping into today's conversation. Today we are talking about beyond charm and chemistry, attracting a partner who is truly emotionally available. And I've always found this to be such an insightful and powerful conversation when we talk about the difference between what is happening in the early stages of a relationship around experiencing someone's charm or the chemistry or that instant spark of attraction, and then what that really means about a long-term relationship and how that translates into the true potential of what we could have long-term. I think that most of us, when we meet someone, and there's a spark and there's chemistry and there's attraction and there's charm and there's all these butterflies and all these exciting feelings. And, you know, a lot of times when we feel that with someone, and I think, you know, for so many of us, if not all of us, that's what we're looking for, right? Like when we're out dating or when we're meeting people, we are looking for that feeling, those butterflies in the stomach, that excitement, that connection, that chemistry, that electricity, that attraction, right? We are looking for that feeling, most of us. And when we find that feeling, again, the butterflies, the excitement, the anticipation, the chemistry, when we feel that with somebody, we tend to think, I found what I'm looking for. Oh, it's going to work, or this is my partner, and we start to fantasize about, you know, what our future might look like and how many kids we're going to have. And, you know, some of us go way too far down the rabbit hole way too early, right? And I know I'm not the only one who's ever done that. Right. So we start to fantasize, we start to dream, we feel that excitement, that chemistry, that attraction, and we start to give that a lot of meaning. And then we start to go down the rabbit hole with what this relationship is going to become, or what we want it to become, or what we hope it's going to become. And I want to say something as we start today is that spark of attraction, or that the butterflies in the stomach, the excitement, it doesn't really have anything to do with who that person is or what real potential the relationship has. It has a lot more to do with where we're coming from and our hopes and our dreams and our fantasies and our excitement. And what we're feeling in a lot of ways is our own projection of the possibility that maybe I've found what I want. And that's not a bad thing. Like, I think it's important to say that, you know, nature itself has built this into the system, right? Like if this wasn't happening for us, nobody would fall in love, nobody would get together, and the human race would die out because we would stop making babies, right? So like, it's not a bad thing. It's meant to happen. It's built into the system. It's built into the design of humanity, but we misunderstand it sometimes. And we meet someone and we feel very strongly about them and we feel very excited about the connection. And we have all of our fantasies and every romantic movie we've ever watched and every romantic song we've ever listened to. And it all gets projected onto this feeling that we're having about this person. And we start to play out the tape of where this could go and who this person could be and how it could all work out and how perfect it could all be. And it's important to recognize, I'm not saying that any of that is bad. It's very normal. And I think, we all want to be romantic. I think being romantic and being in love is some of the best experiences that life has to offer. And we all want that. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it's important to be able to balance that feeling out with the reality of the situation that I don't really know who this person is. And there are some very powerful things happening. And if you look at the science, the hormonal science of what happens in the early stages of a relationship, right? And you look at the hormones that are released and the biochemical properties that are taking place, there's a lot happening that if you study the science on it, they say it's very similar to what happens in our brain when we take a drug. Right? Like it's very similar, the flood of hormones and chemicals and things like dopamine and vasopressin and some of these different neurotransmitters that get flooded into our system. And it creates a very euphoric feeling, right? It also makes us feel a little anxious, a little bit unstable. Right? Like there's this euphoria. There's a high, which is primarily caused by dopamine, right? Our system gets flooded with dopamine and it makes us feel like we're in love with the person, makes us feel wonderful. And we feel so excited and we want to continue spending time with them. Like if you look at what dopamine is, and dopamine is the same thing, like when you smoke a cigarette, it releases dopamine. And one of the biggest reasons that cigarettes are so addictive is because of the dopamine. So nicotine is actually one of the most addictive substances. It's like as addictive as cocaine. And it's because it triggers a huge release of dopamine. And so something very similar happens when we're falling in love with someone, is we're getting a huge amount of dopamine released. And what dopamine is, evolutionarily speaking, dopamine is the reward system in our brain and our body. And so what dopamine does essentially is it says, keep doing this. And I mean, dopamine is important. We need it to live. We need it to function. Like, for example, when you eat a good meal, that also releases some dopamine. And, you eat a good meal and it releases dopamine. And then the system that you get, or the message that you get in your body is that, hey, you should continue eating good meals. That will keep you alive and it feels good, right? So we need dopamine to a degree. And when we're falling in love, we get flooded with dopamine because what that does is that tells us, yeah, keep seeing this person, keep fostering this relationship, because if you keep fostering this relationship, there's a high probability that one day you'll make a baby with them. And if we keep making babies, that prevents the human race from dying out. Right? So there's this reward system, this evolutionary survival-based reward system that is billions of years old, that is driving us to connect with people. And when we're on the receiving end of billions of years of evolution and we're getting that flood of dopamine in our brains, it feels amazing. And it makes us want to keep seeing that person and keep connecting with them and keep fostering the relationship. And that's what's supposed to happen, right? That's what drives us to connect. That's what drives us to want to fall in love. But, I think it's important to say here that we are animals, but we're not like other animals. And so as human beings, when we become conscious, it requires us to have a little more responsibility than just being completely driven by evolutionary processes. And I think this is where we start to talk about what it means to have and create a conscious relationship. And so when we talk about what it is to have and create a conscious relationship, it means we're rising above the level of some of these basic foundational evolutionary forces. And we're experiencing all of that. And again, I don't want to take the romance out of new love. I think, it's one of the most beautiful things to experience, and we shouldn't miss out on it by being too clinical about it. But we also, while we're experiencing that, need to find a way to have our feet on the ground. And something else happens biochemically in these in these early stages of dating. And I'm not going to talk about all the hormones and all that. Like there's actually a lot happening. There's like 10 different hormones that are involved, but I don't want to talk about all of that today. Actually, I did an episode on that a while back. But something I do want to touch on today is that while our body is being flooded with dopamine and something called norepinephrine, which is basically something that triggers like our fight or flight response, makes us feel a little bit anxious, puts us in like a survival mode. And so there's a lot happening there. Also, our sex hormones are involved, like testosterone and estrogen, and like there's a lot happening with all of this. But something else that I think is really critical to today's conversation is while we're being flooded with sex hormones and dopamine and all these things that make us feel really good, make us feel really excited, and give us the butterflies in the stomach and makes us feel anxious and all this cocktail of hormones that are making us feel all these things, something else very important is happening is our serotonin is dropping. And serotonin is the neurotransmitter that makes you feel happy, makes you feel safe, makes you feel at ease in your body, makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel grounded, gives you clarity. And so it's so interesting when you think about what's happening. We're being flooded with all of this stuff, but the thing that keeps us grounded and rational and feeling safe and feeling stable within ourselves is actually dropping. And the reason I think it's so important to address this in today's conversation is because this is the primary reason that we overlook red flags. Right? We're feeling really good. Our reward system is going. We're feeling excited. We're feeling anxious. We're having an evolutionary desire backed by billions of years of evolution that are driving us to connect with this person, that are driving us to want to see them and hear from them. And we're checking our phone for their text messages and all this stuff. But the neurochemical that would have us be grounded and feeling safe and at ease in our body is actually dropping. And so this is an incredibly dysregulating experience, right? The excitement and the rush and the intensity of falling in love is actually a severely dysregulating experience. And this is why we've got to be a little more conscious. Because if you're anything like me and you look back at your dating history, what you've probably seen is there's been a lot of like getting really excited and then falling flat on your face. And that happened to me for years, right? I'd be caught up in the rush, caught up in the excitement, but it wouldn't really go anywhere. And this is why, is because when we're chasing all of those feel-good feelings, but we're not remaining grounded and stable and connected and regulated within ourselves, we're going to miss a lot. And some of you probably relate to this where, you get in a year into a relationship with someone or a couple years into a relationship with someone and you start to see things and you go, oh my God, how did I never see this before? Like, who is this person? Like, it seems like they're a completely different person than who I met 2 years ago. And a lot of times we think, well, they were lying or they were putting up an act. Well, maybe they were lying or putting up an act, or maybe we were so flooded with all of these hormones and neurotransmitters and different things that we were overlooking certain things because we wanted to keep chasing the experience we're having with someone. And so the most important thing that I want to address here, it's not that we shouldn't enjoy this. It's not that we shouldn't fall madly in love with someone and stay up all night talking and, feel more alive than we've ever felt and do things we never would have done otherwise. Those are wonderful things to experience and wonderful things to share with someone. But while we're experiencing that, there needs to be another part of ourselves that recognizes what we're experiencing and why. Right? There needs to be another part of ourselves that says, okay, this is wonderful. This feels great. This is beautiful. I love this feeling. I love being around this person. I love the way that we make each other feel. I love the experiences that we're sharing together. I love that we stay up all night talking. And I love that I love all of this, right? And At the same time, I need to also recognize that I don't really know who this person is. At the same time, I need to recognize that I haven't really gotten to know them. That just a couple of months ago, they were a stranger, or a couple of weeks ago, they were a stranger. Thanks for tuning in today. And if you enjoy the Conscious Love Show, there are a few things you can do with just a few seconds of your time that will really support us in being able to continue bringing these messages to you every single week, completely free of charge. The first thing you can do is give us a 5-star rating on one of the major podcast platforms. The two most popular for this show are Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but you can leave a rating on any platform where you listen to this podcast. And if you'd be willing to take just an extra moment, you can write a few words about the show and share with people how it's touched you and the difference it's made in your life. That will go a very long way in supporting our show. Possibly the biggest thing you can do to support the show is share it with someone that you know can benefit from it. If you get a lot out of it, it's very likely that a friend or loved one of yours will too. And I appreciate it so much when people share the show. If you wanted to take the extra step, you could post a link to today's show on your stories or socials and help get the word out in that way. If you'd be willing to take just one of these steps today, I would appreciate that so much. And I want to say thank you in advance for caring about the show and being willing to support it. Thanks again for listening today. Your presence here means everything to me, and I hope you continue joining me each week for many years to come. Lots of love, and let's get back to the show. And just because we're feeling this way with each other and about each other, and we're sharing all these wonderful experiences together, but just because that's happening, it does not mean that this is my person. It does not mean that we are meant to spend the rest of our lives together. And so I can enjoy this experience on the one hand. I can feel the billions of years of evolution taking over and driving me to connect with this person, and I can ride that wave and I can enjoy it, while at the same time I can have this other, wiser, more conscious part of myself that is reminding me to keep my feet on the ground. That is reminding me that these early sparks of attraction are eventually going to pass. And this actually leads me to one of the biggest misconceptions that I think so many of us fall for is we think that when we meet the right person, that falling in love experience will never end, right? We're like, because we've experienced that at different times in our lives, and we've had these feelings, and then over a period of time, over a period of months or a period of years, that in love intensity starts to dwindle, it starts to fade. And a lot of us at that point go, they must not be the right person, because if it was the right person, it wouldn't fade. And what I want everyone to realize is that it always fades. You physically cannot sustain that level, that like heightened level of neurochemicals. Like it would fry your brain. It would be like, this is what happens to drug addicts, where they find a substance that gives them that same in love feeling, right? Floods their system with all of these neurochemicals and things, and it gives them that same intensity of amazing feeling. And then they use the drug over and over and over and over and over again for many, many years. And what happens is the drug doesn't work so well over time, right? They need to take more and more of it, and they can't quite reach the same experience. And over time, it literally like fries their brain. Like it disrupts their brain's ability to feel and receive these neurotransmitters. So you literally cannot physically sustain this feeling forever. And there needs to be a part of us while we're falling madly in love with someone that recognizes and understands this. And that recognizes that I feel this way about this person right now, and it's wonderful. And again, we're going to stay up all night and talk, and we're going to go skinny dipping at the beach in the moonlight and all the things that we do when we fall in love with someone, right? We're going to do all of that. But while I'm sharing these experiences with someone, I'm going to have a wiser part of me that understands that these early experiences don't really mean that much about where this relationship is going to go long term. And in between those, high level euphoric experiences, in between all the romance, in between all the passion, in between all the hot sex and everything else, in between all of that, there are going to be these other less exciting moments that are actually going to define what potential this relationship really has. And so this wiser part of ourself needs to be paying attention to the less exciting moments. When I communicate a need to this person, when I communicate my vision for the future to this person, when I ask them for what I want, when I create a boundary. These less exciting experiences are actually more important in terms of long-term love and partnership. And so when we want to find an emotionally available partner, what does it mean for someone to be emotionally available? And the reason I'm talking about this is because the sparks and the chemistry that we experience early on, it sometimes feels that we're becoming emotionally connected to the person, right? Because we feel so in love with them. It feels like we're emotionally connected to the person, but we're not actually really connecting them, we're not actually really connecting to them emotionally. We're not really connecting to them emotionally. We're more connecting to ourselves and the experiences that are happening within our own body than we're connecting to the other person, really. And sometimes there will be two people who are falling in love and they're kind of generating this experience in each other, but both of them are in their own isolated experience. We're not really integrating in a relationship. If what I'm saying makes sense, just tap that heart a few times. Right? My body is flooded with all these neurochemicals. Your body is flooded with all these neurochemicals. We feel amazing with each other and we're getting kind of addicted to each other and we can't wait to see each other and we can't wait to get back in bed with each other. But the experience is actually happening in isolation, right? It's happening for me and it's happening for you, but we're not integrating in a relationship together. And so that's not really emotional availability. Emotional availability is what happens when we integrate in a relationship with each other. And so it's things like vulnerability, right? Like someone's ability to really let down the pretense of everything's cool and I've got it all together and like really let you see their heart. To really let you see what's real for them underneath it all. To reveal themselves, right? Like in the world at large, people don't reveal, people conceal. Right? In the world at large, when you go to work, when you're out at the club, when you're doing whatever you're doing, right? Like we're not revealing ourselves, we're concealing ourselves. There's a certain social narrative of who we need to be and how we need to be. And even in dating, right? You go on a date, like there's a certain social narrative of how you need to be on a date. And most people are just trying to be that. I need to be cool. I need to be collected. I need to be attractive. I need to be charming. I need to be funny. I need to be easygoing. I need to be whatever, right? And so everywhere we go to work, we go out with our friends, we go on a date, everywhere we go, there's a certain social narrative of who we're supposed to be in that environment. And we are adapting to that social narrative. And that's actually concealing our truth. Now, it's not a bad thing that we do this. This is part of survival. We need to do it, right? If you went to work and started bawling your eyes out all over the place and sharing your most heartfelt, things, like you probably would get fired. So like, I'm not saying it's bad that we do this. It's just what we do. It's part of surviving socially. But when you're in an intimate relationship with someone, Do you have the ability to, rather than conceal, reveal? And do they have the ability as well? This brings to mind one of my clients that I was working with, and she's in a relationship with someone for quite some time. And after a certain amount of time, he ended up breaking up with her, and she felt very surprised by it. Right? She's like, I didn't see this coming. It's like, it feels like it came out of nowhere. And then when we started talking about it and reflecting on the time she had spent together, what she realized was that she had revealed a lot to him. Right? She had shared so much with him, and he had held space for her, and he had listened, and she felt very connected to him because of what she had shared. But when she looked back over their time together, she's like, you know what? He never really revealed much to me. I never really I felt connected to him because of what I was sharing and the space that he was holding for me. But I never really got to know him that much. He never really revealed that much to me. And so part of emotional availability is vulnerability. It's also consistency, right? It's someone who is able to show up consistently. When somebody is like hot and cold, they're all in 1 minute and they're absent the next. You have an amazing intimate weekend together, and it's wonderful, and it's, oh my God, like I feel so close to this person. I feel so in love with this person. And then after that weekend, they go dark. And they say, oh, I'm busy and I just got caught up. Like, no, they're not busy. I mean, they might be busy. They might be making themselves busy. They may not even be fully aware, but what's happening there is there's a resistance to intimacy. Right? We get really close, and then I need to separate, because when I get too close to someone, it starts to make me feel uncomfortable. And a lot of people, and I'll say this is probably more prevalent with men, but women do it too. A lot of people are unconsciously avoiding intimacy because when they feel too close to someone, it makes them very uncomfortable. I dated a woman like this, right? Where this is before I met my wife, but we would spend a weekend together. We would go camping together. We would go on a trip together. We would spend the night together. We would have these deep, long talks and get very, very close and so intimate. And I was like, oh, like this is everything I've ever wanted. And then next day she would just withdraw, and she'd be like, no contact. And I'd text her and I'd get short responses. And then like 3 weeks later, she'd reach out to me out of nowhere and be like, hey, can I see you? And that was her own resistance to like really being close to someone. Or maybe it was just me. I don't know. Maybe she just wasn't that into me. But whatever it was, this is what people do sometimes. So she wasn't emotionally available, at least not to me. Maybe she was to other people. So consistency, it's not just the ability for someone to be really hot and passionate with you every now and then, but someone to show up for you consistently, to continue to be available. The ability to communicate openly and maturely. Something my wife said, and I had never really thought about it like this until she said it, but when we started dating, and not just in the first, couple of months, but several months into our relationship, when we started having some problems and some disagreements and some conflicts, and the first few years for us were really challenging because we were long distance. And so there was this dynamic where we would be together for a few weeks or a week or a weekend or whatever. And then we would go back into our separate lives. And it was very hard. Anybody who's been long distance knows what I'm talking about. It was very hard to maintain close, intimate connection when we were so far apart. And something my wife said, because a lot of challenges came up during like the first 6 months or first year of our relationship. And something she said was like, I knew this relationship had real potential because of how we worked through challenges together. Right? There was the ability when we were going through a challenge for us to be vulnerable with each other, for us to communicate openly and maturely. She would sometimes communicate to me things that were very uncomfortable for me. I would sometimes communicate to her things that were very uncomfortable for her. And rather than getting angry or attacking, we would be able to understand where the other person was coming from. Right? So there's the ability to hold an uncomfortable reality and not attack because of it. A lot of people, when they're emotionally immature, they need everything to be the way they like it all the time. And if it's not the way I like it, then I go on the attack. That doesn't bode well for a relationship. And then when you're in a relationship with someone like that, the other side of it is you tend to start to tiptoe around and try to never do or say anything that's going to make them uncomfortable. You try to constantly be appeasing to them. And the foundation of the relationship ends up being built on a kind of inauthenticity. And then that's just an explosion waiting to happen, right? Eventually, all of the pressure that's building under the surface is just going to explode. A lot of people who say, oh, we had such a great relationship, but then it just imploded several years in, and I don't know what happened. Well, that's what happened. You weren't really authentic with each other for all those years that it seemed great. It seemed great because you never fought. It seemed great because you never said or did anything that made the other person uncomfortable. But underneath all of that, there was a lot happening that wasn't being addressed and wasn't being spoken. Neither one of you felt safe enough in the relationship to be your whole selves. But you can only repress yourself in a relationship for so long. So there is a need to, when you're falling in love with someone, when you're experiencing that chemistry and that charm, there is a need to have another part of yourself step back and look for these signs of true compatibility, of true emotional availability. Is this person capable of truly meeting me where I am? Now, I think there's something important here to address, where many of us are not actually attracted to emotionally available people. And if you go back to what I was saying earlier about how in the world, there's a certain social narrative of who we're supposed to be, and that social narrative is to conceal. Right? There's a certain expectation that we're supposed to be calm, we're supposed to be cool, we're supposed to be collected, we're supposed to be charming, we're supposed to be funny, we're supposed to be attractive, we're supposed to have it all together, we're not supposed to have emotional issues, we're not supposed to be needy, we're not supposed to blah, 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 right? There are all these expectations for who and how we're supposed to be in the world. And because we've been raised and brought up in a culture where everybody has been concealing, everybody's been concealing their neediness, everybody's been concealing their vulnerability, everybody's been concealing their truth and their honesty and their sensitivity. Everybody's been concealing all these vulnerable aspects of themselves. And you've got to understand the psychological impact it has when you grow up in a culture where everybody's pretending like they have it all together. And a lot of us grew up in households where any real issues were just kind of brushed under the rug. Oh, we don't talk about those things. And when you are a sensitive human being, which we all are, underneath it all, everybody's sensitive, everybody's needy, right? Like we all need things. We all want things. We all want to be loved and held and honored. And this is just the nature of being human. So we all feel these things. And then we grow up in a social dynamic where everybody is pretending that they don't feel these things. right? We grow up in a social narrative, in a social culture where everybody's pretending like they have it all together. Oh, I'm not needy. I'm not vulnerable. Like that doesn't happen for me. And what happens for us underneath it all is we start to be ashamed of ourselves for having these things. When we're children or when we're growing up, like we don't realize that everyone else has these things too, and they're just pretending they don't have them. What we do is we internalize it and we go, something's wrong with me because I feel a lot more stuff than everyone else seems to feel. I seem to want to be sensitive and juicy and loving and all of that, but everyone else seems to be cool and collected and not need it. And so we internalize that and we start to feel ashamed of ourselves for being a sensitive, vulnerable human being. And this is like one of the most obvious examples that just comes to mind is when somebody breaks your heart and you're 2 weeks out from it and you go, oh my God, why am I still stressed out about this person? Right? Why are you still stressed out about this person? Because you entered into a deeply intimate connection with them. You became deeply vulnerable with them. And then they withdrew and broke your heart. You are experiencing one of the most fundamental existential crises that a human being can possibly go through. You're not going to be over it in a few weeks. And yet we judge ourselves for not being over it. Why do we do that? Because we're ashamed of how vulnerable we really are. And so there's this certain cultural narrative of how we're supposed to be. And none of us are actually that way. And then we feel ashamed for not being the way we imagine we're supposed to be, for not being the way that we were socially taught to be. And then what happens is we meet someone who is actually emotionally available. We meet someone who has the capacity to be vulnerable. We meet someone who has the capacity to connect deeply. And what that does is it triggers our shame. We're not able to go where that person wants to go with us because it goes directly against the social identity of who we believe that we're supposed to be. And so what happens is our relationship with that person makes us feel very uncomfortable. And then this egoic part of ourselves, the part of us that has learned to survive in this, I'll call it a cold world, right? The part of us that has learned to survive in this superficial, heartless world starts to judge that emotionally available person because they are allowing themselves to access something that we don't allow ourselves to access. If you understand what I'm talking about right now, just tap that heart a few times. I want to know who I'm speaking to. Right? When someone is truly emotionally available, they start to shine a light on our own egoic pretense. And that makes us uncomfortable. And this is where we enter into this whole dynamic of trying to have the upper hand, right? Like I want someone to like me more than I like them. Right? There's this social dynamic where we don't want to really be vulnerable to somebody. And there's a judgment on somebody who is truly vulnerable, on somebody who is truly emotionally available. And so what we've all kind of been programmed to do is to mentally associate people who are emotionally unavailable as being a high value person. right? When we see someone who's cool and calm and collected and they have it all together and they're attractive and nothing really gets to them and they're charming and they seem to have all the tickets, we mentally associate those people with what an attractive person is. And when someone is real and raw and vulnerable, we say, oh, they're needy and pathetic. And I think something that we all need to do is get a little more comfortable with the part of ourselves that we think is needy and pathetic. Because the truth is, it's not needy and pathetic, it's just human. It's just real, it's just raw. And that is vulnerable. Right? It is vulnerable to acknowledge not that you're needy, but that you have needs. I just want to address a comment. I see this comment here that says 100%, that's how men see women. Well, let me tell you something. I agree with you. I agree that, yes, sometimes that's how men see women. But when a man starts being emotionally available, he'll get judged by women 10 times as harder than a man will judge a woman for being emotionally available. Because men, more than women, are expected to be the strong, stoic type. So yes, I do think that sometimes men see women when they're emotionally available as needy, but it works both ways. And when a man becomes emotionally available, women are going to judge him hard as fuck. Because, and the reason, like, there tends to be a certain stereotype, which I think as we grow and as we as humans become more conscious, I think this is changing. But there tends to be a stereotype where women are emotionally available and men are not. And so many women want men to be more emotionally available, right? It's something I hear from women all the time. I want men to be more emotionally available. I want him to open his heart to me. I want him to share his feelings, right? This is something I hear from a lot of women. But you've got to understand that men have been raised in a world where if they were to ever reveal that part of themselves, it was social suicide. Like I was a young man who grew up in a tough neighborhood. If I was to go out among my peers, the boys or the girls, and start being emotionally available, I mean, it would have been the end for me. Not only would it have been social suicide, like I probably would have gotten like physically beat up. It's dangerous for women too. I'm not saying it's not dangerous for women, but it is much more acceptable for a woman to be emotionally available than a man. And this is why everything I'm talking about today, this is why it's so hard to form an authentic, conscious connection with someone. The reason is that this is all the stuff we're dealing with. To actually truly connect with someone on a vulnerable and authentic level, you've got to sort through 20 layers of bullshit programming. And there are certain versions that are there for men and certain versions that are there for women, but however it shows up, there's a lot of shit to dig through before you can really connect with someone on a heart level. And so, yes, we need to find someone who's emotionally available, but we also need to be someone who's emotionally available. We need to get a little more comfortable embracing that vulnerable, needy part of ourselves before we can really receive that from someone else. And I want to just share an example here because this need that I'm talking about, like this need for connection, this need for love is so fundamental to who we are as human beings. There's some videos that I share in my program where it's called the still face experience. The still face experiments. If anybody has ever, or if you've heard of this, then you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't heard of it, look up the still face experiment, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Where what they do is they have a mother or a father with their baby. So we're talking about an infant or maybe a toddler, and they'll be sitting there and they'll be like playing with them and talking to them and like getting on with them and like, doing all the cute stuff. And they'll be just, normal, like kind of connecting and playing with the baby. And then what they do is they stop and they turn their back, and then they turn back around and they have a still face, right? So they're just like this. They're just like completely still faced, completely stoic. And in less than a minute, you just watch the baby like completely dissolve. The baby's like, hey, what happened? And it's like, and it starts reaching out. It starts waving its hands. It starts like laughing. And then when the parent doesn't respond, they just stay stoic like that. Then the baby just starts to dissolve. And within a minute, the baby is like bawling its eyes out. And when I saw this experiment for the first time, it just really landed for me like how sensitive we truly are. Like how much we fundamentally need and crave that experience of connection. And like just realistically, we're programmed this way because our survival depends on it, right? Like you come into the world as a baby, you need to be able to connect with your parents if you're going to survive. You can't do anything for yourself. So again, we're talking about billions of years of evolution here that have programmed us to be connected. As children, we need to connect with our parents in order to survive. And then as adults, we need to connect with each other in order for our species to survive. And this whole pretending that we're emotionless and tough and strong and stoic and that we don't have any needs, it's going against everything we are biologically and evolutionarily programmed to be. And the irony is it makes us miserable. Like we just all suffer in loneliness and isolation. And we feel unworthy and we feel unwanted and we feel discardable and we feel like we don't matter. The irony is that when we surrender to who we're actually meant to be, which are these deeply connected and emotionally enmeshed beings, it makes like our greatest joy, right? We're meant to live in community. We're meant to live in family. We're meant to live in partnership. And when we surrender to that, it brings our greatest joy in life. And so we've really got to get in touch with that part of ourselves. Like it is so fundamentally human. It is so fundamentally true to who and what we are as human beings. And so just a couple things I want to say. I want to kind of bring it all together here. In the beginning, there is a strong cocktail of neurochemicals and hormones that is driving you to connect and fall in love with someone. Now, I'm not going to go into all the different specifics of it, but what this essentially does is it creates an addictive kind of experience to the person based on the dopamine and the reward centers that are being triggered in your brain. It lowers your serotonin, which means it dysregulates your system. So you become anxious, unstable, dysregulated, and obsessive. And that's what we call falling in love. It's really romantic, isn't it? And it's not a bad thing. I mean, again, anybody who's experienced it, it's kind of fun, right? So, but that is what the experience of falling in love is. And again, there are billions of years of evolution behind that, because if we did not experience that, we wouldn't be driven to mate with each other and our entire species would die out. Right? That is the essence of who we are as human beings, wanting to perpetuate itself. And it's a wonderful thing to be on the receiving end of that. It's a wonderful thing. But again, when we are talking about creating a conscious relationship, a conscious partnership, and partnering with someone who is truly emotionally available, and partnering with someone that has the potential to go the distance, to have a long-term, to build a life together, we've got to be more conscious than just allowing ourselves to be driven by evolutionary instincts. And so, like, for example, when we look at the animal kingdom and the way they do it, most of them are not looking for a life partner, right? It's not within their wiring to desire or seek that. So they're driven by these evolutionary instincts, and they do what they got to do to perpetuate their species, and that's it. As human beings, we have higher concerns than that, right? We want partnership, we want family, we want to build a home and a life with someone. We want to be able to share our dreams together and grow old over the years, right? Like, we want more. And so because we want more, we have to be responsible for more, which means we have to rise above just being driven by our evolutionary instincts. And so while we're falling in love with someone and we're experiencing this wonderful cocktail of, all these things that I'm talking about, there's another part of us that is sitting back and saying, okay, I love how I feel right now. I love what I'm experiencing with this person. I love all the things we're doing and creating together. And I'm going to sit back and know that I don't really know this person yet. And so I just want to make a couple of practical suggestions. It is a very practical suggestion when you're in the early stages of dating someone and you're falling in love with them. It is a very practical suggestion to sometimes take a step back and spend some time apart. And that's hard. Like, I remember, an experience in my early 20s when I was dating someone and we had just started having sex, and it was like we were feeling all of these things. We were staying up all night, going to dinner at 2 a.m, and, just having like all these wonderful experiences together. And I remember maybe my inner wisdom or something in my soul just saying, like, maybe I should have some time apart from this person. And I tried to do it and I couldn't do it, right? I was like, no, I just, let's stay at our house tonight. And then at 11 p.m. we're texting each other and it's like, you want to come over? Okay, let's do it. Right? Like, it's hard. It's hard to do when there's so much driving you to connect with the person. But it is powerful to just have a little bit of discipline and say, you know what? Like, let's have one night together, one night apart. Let's spend a weekend together. And then after the weekend, we'll spend a few days apart. Because removing yourself from the environment is going to give you a little bit of clarity. Being able to detach yourself and regulate your system, right? So instead of continuing to bombard your system with more and more and more and more of these hormones, you're taking a step back and you're giving your system a chance to regulate. They're giving their system a chance to regulate. You're allowing your brain and your body to get a little bit clearer. And then in that little bit of clarity you create, the relationship is going to look a little bit different. So that's the first thing. I'd say to have some clarity. And then you want to notice what comes up for yourself in the clarity. Because as I said, when our dopamine rises and our serotonin drops, we tend to overlook red flags, right? The dopamine is the reward system. So we're chasing that reward. We're chasing that good feeling. The serotonin is the thing that makes us feel regulated and stable within our body, that has us think of things rationally. And so when you take that break and you allow your system to regulate, you might notice things like, you know what? They said something that didn't really sit right with me. And if I was just talking to them and seeing them and spending every day with them, I might not have seen it. But because I took a step back, now I see it. They said something, or they did something, or there's something that doesn't quite add up. Or I think I didn't really feel respected by this thing they said or this thing they did. And I'm not saying that when you notice that you cut it off, but what I am saying is you talk about it. You see, most of us, when we're in that in love phase and we're being driven to connect with this person, we don't want to do anything to disrupt it. Right? Like, oh, I don't want to bring up a real heavy conversation with them when I could just keep falling in love. I don't want to talk about something real and kill the fantasy that we're on right now. And so most of us just ignore all the red flags and keep powering forward. That is a bad thing to do, right? That is a bad approach. And so when you take a little bit of space to allow your system to regulate, to see the situation a little more clearly, you're going to notice things that you wouldn't have noticed before. And then when you notice something that you wouldn't have noticed before, that's your opportunity to talk about it. That's your opportunity to say to the person, hey, I'm really enjoying getting to know you. And this has been a lot of fun. And, we've been experiencing so much together and it's been wonderful. But I have a question for you. The other night when we were together, you said X, Y, or Z. And that really just didn't sit right with me. I was just wondering, can you explain to me what you meant by that? Or the other night when you did this or when you did that, like I really didn't feel respected. And it's not a big deal. Like I'm not trying to make it a big deal, but I think as we develop our relationship, it's important that if something doesn't sit right with me, we talk about it. And I would want you to do the same, right? I would want you to bring it up to me because I want us to create a relationship here where we both feel respected. Right? So I'm just giving you some examples, but these are the kinds of things that you want to bring up. And you're not going to bring them up if you don't have clarity. So by taking the space, you have some clarity. And then by having the clarity, you can talk about what the things you need to talk about. And what this does is it gives you an opportunity to experience a different side of this person. It's really easy when everything's wonderful. But what about when you need to talk about something real with them? Because if we're looking at longevity in a relationship, you're not going to feel in love with them forever. I mean, look, like I've been with my wife 8 years. I am very in love with my wife, but I'm not obsessed with her every day, right? There's a different level of partnership 8 years in than there is 8 weeks in. That experience is not going to last forever, but what will last forever is your ability to have mature, powerful, connected conversations with each other. I think, and I'm looking at one of the comments right now, pacing. It's important to pace a relationship. When someone, you've known someone for 2 weeks and they're saying, I think you're the one, I want to marry you. That's the time when you go, hold on, you don't really know me that well. Right? Like a lot of people, like love bombing is a big thing, right? And this is something that, it's not only narcissists who do it, but it's something like when we look at narcissistic abuse, a lot of times the narcissist will start by love bombing. And what the narcissist or anybody who wants to love bomb someone, what they're actually doing is they are finding someone who is desperate to hear certain things. You're amazing. I've never met anyone like you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I love you so much. You're my dream person. You're whatever, right? And what they are looking to do is find someone who wants to hear certain things, who's desperate to hear certain things, and then they tell them everything they want to hear. And then when someone's desperate to hear something, and then I tell them something, I now have control of this person. You should never allow anyone to love bomb you. Listen, I know that we all want to feel special, right? It's fundamental to being human. We all want to feel special. But people will use your desire to feel special as a way to manipulate you. And so we've all got to recognize, like, look, none of us are that special. And I mean that in the most loving way possible. We're all wonderful. We're all amazing. We all have beautiful gifts to give. But none of us are that special that someone is going to fall head over heels in love with us within 2 weeks of knowing us and want to spend the rest of their lives with us. None of us are that special. And we want to feel that special, right? We want to feel like, oh, I'm so amazing that 2 weeks into this person knowing me, they're head over heels in love and they want to spend the rest of their life with me. But listen, I want everyone to hear me on this. If somebody is telling you that, they are either so like disconnected from themselves that they don't even know what's happening, or they're trying to manipulate you. It's one of the two. And in either case, it's a little bit of a red flag. Now, look, it's possible that someone is just, feeling very strongly and they're maybe getting a little ahead of themselves with what they're saying. But this is why the responsibility always falls on the more conscious person, right? So the more conscious person needs to say, hey, I really appreciate your enthusiasm here, but like, let's be real. We've only known each other for 2 weeks. Let's give ourselves a couple of months and see where we are then and revisit this conversation. Right? And when you say that, it's so powerful because what you're communicating is that I am not going to be bought with charm and flattery. I am not just going to let you tell me what I want to hear and gain power over me by doing that. So, last thing I want to say about this is that when we recognize that it's not really as simple as falling in love with someone and living happily ever after. It's more like we fall in love with someone, then we become a little disillusioned by the relationship. We have to learn how to work with them in reality, discover their real potential for a future, and then make a decision maybe a year in or a year and a half in if this is someone I really want to spend the rest of my life with. We don't just fall in love with someone and then spend the rest of our life with them. That's what we think happens in the movies. You know, all the romantic comedies, right? They fall in love and there's electricity and then they live happily ever after. But we don't see what happens 6 months later. All we see is them falling in love, right? So it's not really an accurate representation of what a relationship is really like. And what a relationship is really like is we fall in love with someone and then that in love experience fades and we face the reality of merging our lives with another person and discovering what real potential there is. And like, I'm going to say this for myself. I've had several relationships and they've all fallen into a few categories. They were very short-lived, like crash and burn, right? We get together, it's hot, it's amazing, and then there's nothing after that. Then there were the relationships that lasted about a year or a year and a half. And within that amount of time, I was crystal clear if I wanted to be with the person or not. The only relationship that I've had last longer than that was my relationship with my wife, which were 8 years, and I still want to be with her. Now, I understand some people spend 20 years with someone that they're maybe not supposed to be with or wasn't a good fit for them. But when that happens, there is a huge amount of operating over our intuition and our truth and forcing something to work that's not really working. But when you are doing this consciously and you spend 6 months or 8 months or a year with someone, you are going to get very clear about who they are when you're not trying to force it to work or you're not trying to stay with them because you're so afraid to leave, right? But when you're really doing this consciously, you're going to spend maybe a year with someone, a year and a half, and you're going to know who they are and what you can expect from them. And if you're connected to yourself and your truth and your authenticity and you know what's real for you, you're going to either say, this is the kind of person that I can see spending the rest of my life with, or I can't. And you'll be clear about that. Because you approached it consciously and maturely. You gave it enough time to really discover who the person is and really discover the potential you have with them. And look, if you're a year or 2 years in and both of you have, done some good work together and you're like, we really want to be together. We see a future together. We feel like this relationship is in alignment. We want to really build a life together. And you make that commitment, there is a very, very strong chance that relationship will last forever. But that's only if you were really conscious in that year, in that first couple of years. And a lot of people, they fall in love, and then when the love starts to die, they get engaged. And then after the engagement, they have the wedding. And then after the wedding, they have kids. And then they find themselves 10 years later, they've been keeping themselves so busy with the next step, but they've never really consciously assessed the relationship and asked myself, how do I feel? And is this relationship truly in alignment with me? And that's what we have to do to create conscious love. So that's what I want to leave you with today. I really enjoyed going over this with everybody. Again, this is a powerful conversation. I think these are some of the most essential skills for those of us who truly want a long-term loving conscious partnership. So with that, I want to open up for questions. I'm going to go ahead, look through the comments, see what questions we have here. If you have a question, drop it in the chat, and I'll be able to take maybe 3 or 4 today. Okay, this question is from Amanda Barbosa. How do we get over heartbreak when you fell hard and you are now crushed? I do also want to say in response to this question that I did a podcast episode on overcoming heartbreak recently as well. And I'd invite you to tune into that, because that is that's going to, again, give you much more context than I can give you here with a short answer. But what I want to say is heartbreak is a version of grief. And if you look at grief and people who teach about grief, there are really 5 stages to grief, right? You go through not denial. You go through denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance is the final stage. And so what we're really looking at around heartbreak is acceptance. Acceptance that the relationship is over, acceptance of myself in relationship to that, acceptance of facing a future without this person, acceptance of like, I'm enough, right? Like I'm okay without this person. I don't need this person, right? Like it's acceptance of all of this. And so overcoming heartbreak is really about embracing acceptance. And there's a process of like in the human experience that we go through when we are embracing acceptance around something. And that process is, first, we're in denial about it, right? So no, it can't be true. There's got to be another way. There's got to be this can't be it, right? First, we're in denial about it. And then after we get through the denial, then there's bargaining. Well, maybe I can get them back. Maybe there's something I could say. Maybe there's something I can do. Maybe there's a way that we could work through this, right? And then after you get through the bargaining phase and you really accept that, okay, it's over. I'm not in denial about it anymore. I'm done bargaining and trying to find a way to fix it, right? Then the next phase is anger, right? We're angry. How could this happen? How could they do this to me after everything I did, after everything I gave? And then after we process that anger, then it's depression, right? Then it's like we're just sadness, and we're just really allowing ourselves to feel the sadness of the loss, right? This person was in my life and now they're not. And I wake up every day and I miss them. And I feel the loneliness and the loss and the sadness of that. And then as we finally process that sadness, we come to acceptance. And acceptance is where we find peace with it. We accept the situation. We accept their decision. We accept ourselves. We accept our future without. We become hopeful again. We become optimistic. We believe there's more for us, right? Like acceptance is the resolution. And what I want to say is the more willing you are to feel the depression, right? If we look at denial and bargaining and anger, those are really ways of protecting ourselves against the feeling of depression. And the reality of the situation is that you lost something that you loved and it hurts. It's really that simple. And the denial and the bargaining and the anger are ways of protecting ourselves from that reality. And so the more easily or naturally that you can embrace the depression around it and just allow yourself to, again, accept that, okay, this happened and it hurts and I can't change it. I can't fix it. and it hurts and I'm sad and I've lost somebody I love and they're not coming back and that hurts. And the more you can really allow yourself to embrace and feel that, the more quickly you will get to the final stage of acceptance. When we are grieving something, the practice is to really allow ourselves to feel it fully. And it comes in waves. Anybody who's been through grief, if you've lost a relationship, if you've lost a loved one to death or anything like that, anybody who's been through grief knows that it comes in waves. And so the waves are going to come. And when the waves come, you just take a deep breath and you breathe through it and you release and you let go and you feel it fully. And then the wave passes. And then you might feel quite optimistic and quite hopeful. And then maybe another wave comes. And so you start practicing embracing and surrendering to these waves. And each time you embrace and surrender to one of these waves, the wave passes and you've accepted it a little bit more. And over time, the waves come less and less frequently, and they're less and less heavy when they do come. And in essence, you are releasing the experience from your body, from your being. So that's the way to do it. Just one other suggestion I would make around this is work with someone. Like find a coach or a therapist, somebody that you can work with to help you process this experience in a healthy way. Talking about it, mentally framing it in a powerful way for yourself is important right now. So sending you lots of love, Amanda. Thank you for the question. I know where you are. It's going to be a little bit of a journey. It's not going to disappear overnight. Give yourself permission to feel it and go through all the stages of the experience. Love yourself through it. Surround yourself with people who love you. Get support like a coach or a therapist, someone who can guide you in the experience so you don't feel so lost in it. And this will pass. It's just going to take a little bit of time. And there's a healthy way to go through it and an unhealthy way to go through it. And working with someone is going to help you go through it in a healthy way. So lots of love, Amanda. Thank you for the question. I know it's not easy. I've been through some big heartbreaks in my life and sending you a lot of love. Thank you. Charlene Santiago is asking, what is your insight on an avoidant man who likes to keep some things in his life private? Do you think we should share everything with our partner, or is that totally okay? I mean, I think it kind of depends on what it is, but no, I don't think we should share everything. I think people are entitled to some privacy. And especially, I think it depends a lot on how long you've been with the person and how well you know them. But people are entitled to privacy, right? So, I might need to know a little bit more about what you're asking and the context of it. And there's a difference between hiding something that I know would be hurtful to the relationship, right? And I'm hiding it because just give an obvious example, right? If I'm cheating on my partner and I'm hiding it from them, I can't say oh no, I'm entitled to my privacy. No, I am intentionally out of integrity with my partner and I'm doing something that is knowingly hurtful and I'm hiding it. That's not okay. Right. But people are entitled to private thoughts. People are entitled to if he's going out with his friends, he doesn't need to divulge every little thing that they do. I think when we don't allow somebody a certain degree of privacy in their lives, that becomes controlling. Right? When we start to demand everything all the time, you don't get to have any private thoughts or private feelings or any, going out with your friends and not being questioned about what you did afterwards. That starts to be controlling. And that's, borderline abusive. And usually that kind of not allowing our partner to have some privacy, usually that is more about your own insecurity than anything to do in the relationship. So again, I don't know the details of your situation. I don't know the nature of the kinds of things he's trying to keep private, but let's put it this way. At the end of the day, you are never going to know everything about another person. No matter how many years you spend with them, no matter how well you get to know them, there's going to be a whole world inside of their mind and heart that only they will ever know. And a lot of times that makes us insecure because we're oh, well, if they have thoughts and feelings that I'm not aware of, they could be thinking that they want to leave me. They could be thinking that they're attracted to someone else. They could be thinking and feeling things that make me uncomfortable. So I need to know everything to make sure that I'm okay in this relationship. And what I want to say is that's the nature of being in a relationship with someone. It's not, are they allowed to have privacy? It's that they do have privacy. And when you accept someone in a partnership, you also accept that about them. Right now, again, if he's cheating on you and hiding it and claiming I have privacy, right, that's a little bit different. And I think there's a lot of nuance here, depending on what the situation is, depending on what it is exactly you want to know. So I can't go into every nuance and every detail of this. But to answer the question, it is okay for someone to expect reasonable amounts of privacy in a relationship. And I think it's important that we give each other that space in a relationship. That allows us to be sovereign people. That allows us to have autonomy. It allows us to not feel like we're being controlled. And there are obvious boundaries and limits to that. So I'm going to leave you with that. And I hope that allows you to kind of figure out where you stand with it. Thank you for the question. It's a powerful question. I appreciate you bringing that up. And I hope that supports you in kind of figuring out where you stand with that. So this question is from Lo Ren. The question is, do men go through heartbreak like women? If they try to jump right back into a new connection, is that super unhealthy, or is it fine since we are evolutionarily programmed to connect with people? Great question. Great question. Thank you. So do men go through heartbreak like women? Yes. And I think I don't think it's a question of men or women. I think it's a question of human beings. Like, I often share about my first heartbreak when I was 16 years old, and my first love, my high school girlfriend, she was like cheating on me behind my back. And then she blindsided me and broke up with me. And like, I was devastated. I didn't recover for like a full year, or I cried my eyes out. Like it was like an existential crisis for me. And so do men go through it the same way women do? Of course. But, she, on the other hand, was like already with someone new. I mean, she was cheating on me before we broke up, right? So she like jumped right into another relationship. She actually broke up with me to go with someone. And I think women a lot of times do that, where they'll lose interest in a relationship. They won't break up with the person, but they'll distance themselves. They'll find someone else. And then when they feel like they have somewhere else to go, they'll break it off and go do that. And I think that's kind of unhealthy, right? And I'm not going to say that men don't do that too. I think people do that sometimes. But I'll also share, like, I ended a relationship the day before I connected with my wife the first time, like the night before. Like, she was at my house and we had like a long talk. We ended our relationship. And then the next day I ended up going out with some friends and my wife was there, and we got connected. And then we started dating like literally hours after I ended this relationship. But these were like two very different situations. Like when I ended that relationship, it had been 6 months of like drama and chaos, and I was just exhausted and I was done with it. And like I was like really clean. Like I was like, I am over this, done, clean. So when I met my wife and we started connecting, I was in a clean place. There's also a place at which we're heartbroken and we're devastated, and we go jump into bed with someone else because we don't want to feel the pain of the heartbreak. And so, you have a couple of questions here, but one, do men experience heartbreak like women? Human beings experience heartbreak. And going back to some of what we talked about today around emotional availability, there is a level of emotional availability that we have to be with ourselves before we can really be honest about how much a relationship is affecting us. A lot of men who are emotionally unavailable don't really allow themselves to feel a heartbreak, but a lot of women who are emotionally unavailable do that too. Right? So it's not a man or a woman thing, but it's about the individual and how much do they allow themselves to connect in a relationship? How much do they allow themselves to feel the loss of the relationship? In terms of jumping into a new relationship right away, sometimes we grieve a relationship while we're in it, So when the relationship ends, we're ready for something new. And usually if we're the one who ends it, we've done a lot of grieving already. So we're more ready to move on. Usually if the other person ends it and we're still in it, we've got some grieving to do before we're ready to move on. So I think to answer your question, yes, men experience it the same way women do. It's really about how emotionally available the individual is. And in terms of jumping into a relationship right away, it can be okay. It can also be a way of avoiding. It depends on where you are when the relationship ended. But if you're like really heartbroken by something and you're going out and jumping into bed with someone to distract yourself and not feel it, well, you're likely, in most cases, perpetuating a cycle that's going to lead to more and more heartbreak. Right? When we repeat those kinds of patterns, one of my friends told me, the best way to get over someone is by getting under someone else, right? I don't think so, right? Like that's a kind of cycle that tends to perpetuate more pain. That's a kind of cycle that tends to perpetuate the same kinds of experiences over and over and over again. When we allow ourselves to truly grieve and experience the loss of something, that tends to elevate us, right? That tends to have us move forward with greater awareness, greater sensitivity, a greater ability for empathy and connection and all of those good things. So I think I answered the question. There's not really a one size fits all for this. It's about the individual. It's about where the individual is. I think in general, it can be a little bit destructive to stereotype men or women in any particular way. And, I think historically there have been a lot of stereotypes about men and a lot of stereotypes about women. But as we evolve and we grow in consciousness, all of those stereotypes are becoming less and less true. And each individual is becoming more of an individual who's very unique, distinct from how men are or women are. Right. And so as we as individuals become more conscious, I think something we want to do is let go of those stereotypes. If a man has some kind of toxic behavior and hurts you, you don't want to be like, oh, that's just how men are. No, that's not how just men are. That's just how that man was. And maybe there have been other men in your life who were like that too, but that doesn't mean that's how all men are. But when you start to say that's how all men are, that's how you start to see all men, and all of your relationships with men start to be framed through that lens. And then you don't become available to anything else. Right? So as we become more conscious, something we start to do is experience individuals as individuals rather than projecting our own wounded beliefs onto them. Anyway, great question, Loren. Thank you for asking. I'm going to wrap up here. I just want to say to everybody, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being on here with you today. As always, I always look forward to this. I look forward to jumping into these conversations. Love and blessings to all of you. If you're just tuning in, make sure to subscribe to the Conscious Love Show podcast. You can find it on all major platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to check it out. Love and blessings to everybody. I'll be back with you next Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern time. See you then. Lots of love, everybody. Take care. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.